Thank you very much, Peter. A very good morning to all of you, and let me also start by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity of sharing my thoughts with you on this subject. And I must say that Alberto was kind enough to let me choose the topic on which I wanted to make the presentation, so it's this one. And I also must confess that I hadn't really thought this through when I suggested the topic, because I had thought that I would talk about the Sustainable Energy for All initiative of the UN Secretary General. I've been part of its evolution since we started discussing about it, and I thought that would be an interesting subject to talk about. However, when I started putting together the presentation, I was a little bit stymied by the question and whether we have a common understanding of a sustainable energy future. I mean, what could it possibly mean, and how would we bring it all together, which is the bigger part of the challenge. So as usual, as we tend to do sometimes, I went and looked at Dr. Google to see what is it that different people have said on the subject, and actually didn't come across very much, except that there was a very interesting video recorded discussion amongst 4 or 5 top CEOs of energy companies, moderated by the head of a management school. And I went through the discussion with a lot of interest. And the key points that I picked up from the different heads over there was that we need to maintain the lifestyle of people. So we have to have enough energy to be able to do that. And energy has to be affordable, not just for people in the developing world, but obviously also for people in the developed world. And I've put affordable in these kinds of quotes because what is affordable is another question, or what is the level of pricing at which we think that stuff is affordable is a question that I think we need to answer. We need to be able to meet demand. So that also goes closely with maintained lifestyles. So that's another key aspect of sustainable energy future. There was also this concern about the sourcing of energy, and that when especially companies go out and look for energy forms, and I presume that here we were talking more about fossil energy than renewable energy, the issue of country risks came up very strongly, and the fact that we need to be able to minimize that. Of course, because a number of companies represented US companies, there was a tremendous amount of interest in shale gas. And as all of you are well aware, the shale gas revolution in the US has brought back the emission levels in the US to 1992 levels, if I have my figures right. So willy-nilly, the US is probably one of the most successful countries in terms of reducing its emissions of greenhouse gases. How sustainable is the whole shale gas revolution? How sensitive is it to the pricing of gas itself is another issue that we will have to come back to. There was also a fair degree of enthusiasm, I could say, about nuclear power and the role that nuclear power could play. But as we all know, this is not shared across the world. There was the sense that we need to be able to cater to constituencies, and this kind of tension that there always is between short-term political cycles and the long-term needs of a sustainable energy future. Carbon capture and storage or sequestration, different people refer to it in different forms. I thought it was storage. But this is, again, something that the CEOs felt we must have, because in their view, we will continue to use fossil fuels for quite some time. So CCS is an essential part of the technology mix, but I think there are several questions on this as well. The need for storage technologies, battery technologies, was emphasized, and of course, somewhere there was a mention of energy access in the way that we normally understand it. And it was unfortunately linked very closely to a perception that when we talk about providing energy access to the millions that do not have access to clean energy today, we will necessarily have to resort to poor quality, inefficient, coal-based power generation, and therefore, this is not something which is desirable. So I thought it was interesting to listen to them and to see what it is that they had to say. But going on to try and formulate my own views, sustainability in the context of energy could possibly refer to either reduced dependence or, in an extreme, independence from fossil fuels. I think there are few people, despite the question that was asked in the earlier session, that believe that we will have full independence from fossil fuels. But it could be. It could be that we use the Brundtland definition and adapt it to energy and talk about leaving behind enough energy resources for the needs of future generations. Having said which, today we are unable to distinguish between needs and demands. So almost everything that we consume, we justify as a need and essential for our well-being. So therefore, in a sense, this would translate into saying that we have enough to meet the needs or the demands of future generation, no matter what that level of demand is. It could also refer to a wish to minimize the environmental footprint of both energy production and consumption. And this has been said as well. Sustainability could also, instead of looking at each one of these individually, it could be linked to the 3 pillars of sustainable development, that we have to have enough energy for economic growth, for ensuring that we achieve this economic growth at little or no cost to the environment, and that everybody has access and the global good of equity is also met. So sustainability, I think when we talk about sustainability, we could refer to each and any one of these as well. But energy could also be seen in the context of sustainability. So energy in the context of sustainability could be an instrument for achieving universal access to a number of developmental services. We are talking today, when we discuss Sustainable Development Goals or the post-2015 goals, we are talking about universal access to a lot of developmental services, education, health, water, and so on. So energy is a key instrument, and without the availability and adequate access to energy, we are not going to be able to achieve this goal. It could also be seen in the context of facilitating water security for people, food security, adaptive capacity building, and so on. I mean, these are not exhaustive lists, but this is only for purposes of discussion. We definitely need energy from an adaptation angle, and I'll come back to that. Or it could also be seen as obviously the key instrument for avoiding the challenge of climate change and how we deal with energy, and that's the focus of this conference as well. We would obviously like all of the above to hold good in terms of sustainability of energy and energy for sustainability, both of them. But today, I think we all recognize very well that we are not on track to meet the 2 degrees Celsius guardrail that we set for ourselves. Global energy-related CO2 emissions increased by 1.4% to reach 31.6 gigatons in 2012. We have crossed the concentration level of 400 parts per million. So I think most or several of the climate scientists do believe that we are not going to be able to remain within the 2 degrees Celsius. Of greater concern is the fact that we have started coming out with reports and analyses that talk about the implications of a 4 degrees Celsius world, almost sending the signal that the next milestone after 2 degrees Celsius is 4 degrees Celsius, and that is what we need to be targeting for in terms of limiting our emissions of greenhouse gases or looking at the development pathways that we are following. So I think that's a little dangerous, but we seem to be heading in that direction. But the World Energy Outlook from the IEA has said that even though we are in the year 2013 and even though we have crossed 400 parts per million, we still have a window of opportunity that is, of course, fast closing, but it is still open. If we put in place several measures, and the key ones that they have identified are around, no surprises here, energy efficiency, and I think energy efficiency can provide almost 40% of the comfort level that we are looking for in this particular window. Limiting construction and use of least efficient coal power, coal-based power generation. Reducing the methane emissions from oil and gas production, and of course accelerating the phase out of subsidies on fossil fuel consumption, which should even the playing field for renewable energy and make that more attractive. Confounding factor over here, of course, is the short-lived carbon pollutants, on which there is still not, at least at a policy level, that much of a consideration of the role that these are playing. And to top it all, we still have about 2.6 billion people in the world without access to clean cooking energy, about 1.4 billion without access to electricity in their homes. Water scarcity is drawing attention to the linkages with water of energy, and both in terms of what energy can do for water and in terms of water as a constraint to energy production. A number of projects, definitely in India and I think in other parts of the world, are being decided depending on the availability of water. And I think the shale gas issue that we raised earlier is another key. Water is going to be another key driver for the shale gas potential to be realized. And I think food security concerns add a third dimension. So energy, water, food all coming together. Related with food, of course, is the whole issue of biomass as well, and we heard a lot about it in the earlier presentation. So I think the issue is getting very complex also because it's not just energy in which we are hitting boundaries, but even for water and food and for other materials and commodities, we are hitting the boundaries of what is available to us on a per capita basis and on an aggregate basis. And when we start looking at a sustainable energy future for the world, we really have to look at it in its totality. Climate change also makes the energy sector more vulnerable, as we are well aware, while increasing the demand for energy in some geographies from an adaptive capacities point of view. So let me come from here to the subject that I had originally started with, which is sustainable energy for all. When we started discussions which led to the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, the group was called the Advisory Group on Energy and Climate Change. And it would obviously recognize the linkages between the two, which is difficult to miss, and tried to see from an international perspective, from a UN perspective, what is it that could be palatable, because the UN had been notoriously unsuccessful in bringing energy onto any agendas in the past. So after a lot of almost 3 to 4 years of discussions, deliberations, wide stakeholder consultations, etc., this is the initiative that we came up with. I'm not getting into the details, but the 3 sub-goals that we set for ourselves, recognizing that energy by itself is as important as energy in the context of climate change, were: 1, to provide access to modern energy for all by the year 2030. And we were very careful in ensuring over here that we talk about access to modern energy rather than access to clean energy, because I think we felt as a group that in the context of those 1.4 and 2.6 billion people that we are talking about, access to modern energy in itself is an end goal or the top priority goal, and access to clean modern energy would probably come at the second step. So the first step over here is provide access to modern energy for all by the year 2030, double the rate of energy efficiency improvements in the next 20 years over that achieved in the last 40 years. And these are global goals we are talking about. not getting into national level goals, not getting into common but differentiated responsibilities and all those discussions. But these are aspirational goals at a global level to be able to double the rate of energy efficiency improvements and to double the share of renewable energy in total energy mix all by the year 2030. And the calculations that were done behind these numbers gave us reasonable confidence to believe that if we achieved these three goals, we would still be in a position to, or on track to be under the 2 degrees Celsius human-induced temperature changes. The question is, if I go back to these three goals that we defined, do we fall short? Not by itself, because the Sustainable Energy for All initiative was not designed to answer some of the larger questions of a sustainable energy future in all its dimensions that we discussed just now. But does it fall short in the context of the discussion that we are having today? If you look at and translate those three goals in simple language, access to modern energy for all would necessitate considerations of affordability. This links back to the CEO discussion that we had as well. But more importantly, for the 1.4 and 2.6 billion people, if we are to provide energy sources, we have to ensure that these are affordable. But this is only affordable for the poor. And the question that we have not been able to answer is energy access at what level are we looking to provide? And what are the vulnerabilities that we would create by not having access to energy? I think this got a little mixed up my slides, so you'll have to bear with me. The second goal that we had on energy efficiency is definitely caters to the economic and the environmental aspects of the sustainable development challenge. It would stretch the life of energy resources, it would reduce the environmental footprint, and of course increase productivity, so good from all dimensions. But it does not cover the consumption levels as we referred to obliquely in the past, and it is focused largely on technologies and the technological interventions that would help us bring about reductions in energy consumption, does not address itself to the issue of lifestyles or to what is need, or indeed to demand management and conservation measures. The renewable energy goal would contribute to energy security and to reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as other local pollutants. But at the same time, there are a number of concerns around reliability and intermittency of renewable energy sources. Typically, I think the most attractive sources that one looks at and finds already in place are solar, wind, biomass, and hydropower in the context of renewable energies. And I think each one of these is extremely sensitive also to climatic changes and shifts in patterns that will take place as a result. So these are some of the issues around the goals as we have currently got them defined. Where else do these goals fall short of what we might consider to be a sustainable energy future? One, it does not explicitly capture the role of energy as an enabler of sustainable development. It talks about sustainability in the context of energy, but not energy in the context of sustainability as much. It does not spell out a vision beyond 2030. Indeed, it was not its purpose to do so. But when we talk about the climate change problem in particular, I think we cannot stop at 2030. It may not fully factor in adaptive demands for energy. So as we go along, if we say that we are in for climate change and we have a committed level of climate change, it will have its implications for, as we said, weather patterns, etc. And the question is that if we are doing our energy projections on the basis of historical trends and links to income levels and so on, we may not be fully correctly estimating the levels of energy demand that we are likely to see in the future. It's a little unclear on the impacts of climate change on hydropower and biomass in particular, and therefore the role that, and the other renewables that we spoke about, and therefore the role that these can play in the future. We still tend to look at historical 100 years data, etc., to be able to look at what it is that we can expect. maybe we haven't given enough attention to the role of tidal power. But on the flip side, if I was looking at shortcomings, on the flip side, the Sustainable Energy for All initiative and the goals defined are a big leap towards a sustainable energy future. Not all the way there, but definitely a big step. It has to be supported by the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the next process that we are heading into. We need to take this initiative by itself to look at the provisioning of energy and what is it that we can do to make energy sustainable. But in order to be able to answer the other question of how do we ensure that energy is available for sustainable development, in the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to look at how we formulate this so that we are able to capture that dimension. And of course, in the context of climate change discussions as well, energy needs to find its own place beyond just looking at energy security issues. But given the uncertainties in climate, defining a sustainable energy future would be difficult at the minimum. It would definitely have to be dynamic because of the uncertainties. Based on the precautionary principle, responsive to adaptive needs, resource efficient, and investment optimizing. The reason why I say investment optimizing is that we are already faced, if we want to remain within the 2 degrees Celsius guardrail, with some pretty expensive prospects of stranded energy infrastructure. And as especially the developing countries are moving along their energy pathways and making the investments that they are most comfortable with, which are largely fossil fuel driven, the prospects of stranded assets is actually going to increase quite substantially. So I think we really need to be able to improve our understanding of these interactions, take a more holistic perspective, and of course look at the optimal allocation of resources in order to be able to move to a sustainable energy for all future. As you notice, I did not speak very much on India per se, but a number of these issues apply equally for India. I would be happy to take that up in the discussions. But to me, the most stark example most recently that we are seeing is the kind of situation of floods in the northern parts of India, and the kinds of damages that this is creating, and our complete unpreparedness to be able to deal with it. The chief minister of the state that was responsible for the kind of disaster that we are seeing, they're not responsible, but it's a state in which this disaster has taken place, came up with a statement that said that the information that he received from the Indian Meteorological Department was unactionable. And I think that is a very, very difficult statement to understand as to what was unactionable about it. Was it that he did not trust their forecasts on the kinds of deluge that we could expect? Or was it that we were unprepared in knowing the number of pilgrims, because these were pilgrims that were caught in this disaster, the number of pilgrims that were visiting these 2 sacred sites that we have in the hills? Or was it that we didn't have an adequate communication infrastructure in place, or we just didn't have the models to be able to say that if this is the kind of change in weather pattern that we expect, then what could be the implications of it in terms of the flash floods that we saw, in terms of the landslides that we saw, in terms of being able to map that onto the places where people were being located, etc. And of course, there are a number of management issues included in that, in terms of the rampant construction that has taken place without consideration to regulations and so on. So I think there are a number of issues that we have to be able to address ourselves to when we talk about a sustainable energy future for the world and what could it look like. The very simplistic way of going about it is to say that we need to have energy efficiency, we need to move to renewables, and we need to provide access, of course, which is more on adaptation than mitigation. But it is obviously a much more complex question, and I'm not going to try and answer it here, but would be happy to take any questions on any aspects of this, or indeed listen to your recommendations on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, any questions for Leena, please?
Alberto Torres, yes, sir. Thank you very much, Leena, for a very interesting talk. And I'd just like to understand a bit better your 3 points about the sustainable energy for all. To what extent these 3 points are self-consistent, the access and the fact that you have to provide double renewables and also the efficiency? I mean, what kind of calculations have been done to? And also, I mean, you mentioned that the 2030 is your endpoint, but of course in energy, you know, normally the viewpoint is longer, the investment is like 30 years or more. So why wasn't it extended to a longer term?
Well, I think in terms of analyses, there's been a longer term frame, but in terms of setting goals, which was the purpose of this particular committee that there was, we said, let's look at the year 2030, and it's obviously not an endpoint, and we would have to move forward from there. In defining these 3 goals, I think the committee and the analysis that was done, we were very careful to ensure, and we keep repeating the point that these are not standalone goals and that there are tremendous amount of synergies that are there, and the 3 need to be looked at in an integrated manner. A very interesting example that comes to mind, just to elaborate on what you said, is around the issue of energy access. So when you talk about providing, and of course there are many questions around energy access as a quick digression. Question is, do we want to provide energy into the homes of people, or should we be in a position to provide the services that people are looking for? And the example that I'm going to give you is one where we are providing the services that people are looking for. And you can look at both lighting and cooking, because those are the 2 major challenges that we have. And in the context of lighting, if you look at several programs around the world that are dealing with solar lantern-based lighting services that are being provided, in several cases, these are energy services that are being provided and not the lantern and the solar panel that are being sent into the homes of people. But we are bringing in efficiency improvements over there, because these are the best of technologies that are being deployed, state of the art, whether it is in terms of the solar panels or the luminaires that are being used, etc. So the efficiency element is there very strongly. It is based on solar energy, so it is renewable, and of course it is addressing itself to the issue of access. So it is a win-win-win solution that we are talking about. Similarly, in the case of cook stoves, there have been many instances in the past where we have tried to intervene with cooking energy solutions and failed for almost 30 years. There are new experiments going on today, and there is reason to hope that today we might be a little more successful than we were in the past, because we keep building on the failures that we had in the past. So today, when we are talking about improved cook stove technologies based on forced draft, powered to some extent by solar run fans, because in most of these areas you don't have energy. You are bringing together renewable energy with energy efficiency, because the efficiency of even these biomass burning cook stoves goes up from about 8 to 10% to about 45 to 50%. And of course, it deals with a number of other challenges like health, etc. So you have a number of cases where you can bring together energy efficiency, renewables, and either access or livelihoods, as the case may be. And I'm bringing in livelihoods because the other important part of the access agenda is not just the final consumption of energy, but also the productive uses of energy. The small and medium enterprise sector, which constitutes the bulk of industry in several developing countries, is again starved of energy. But they have also not got access to good technologies. So we can bring about Again, a mix of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and of course access that helps to move these people forward. So I'm trying to keep my response short, but I think we have looked at all of these three. And there are some technical reports available on the Sustainable Energy for All website that give the details.
So any further questions? Right. So I'd like to thank Leena again, please, for
Thank you.